back with my friend Patrick Donadio. He is a communications expert and guru in Columbus here locally, and known nationally for his communicating with impact model. He has a great book on the subject, and we're just having a conversation because it's really a leader's guide to communication. And so I just really wanted to step back and just reflect on communication and leadership. You've trained literally thousands of people, every type of organization, every industry. I don't think there's one that you haven't covered. And, you know, one of the things I've seen is leaders, myself included, we're always struggling with communication. Mm-hmm. You do an employee survey, never do they say communication's off the charts. It's always, it can get better, right? And you go to your customers and they always say, you know, the communication could be better, or the message isn't clear, or whatever. Go to your website, right? It can always be more refined. So you are here to help us with this elusive goal of communication. And so I've been kind of compiling some questions, and I'd love to just jump right in. Are you ready to jump in?
I'm ready.
Okay. So first of all, just communications, it seems like it's getting higher and higher in terms of, it's always been important, but it seems like it's getting more important. Why is communication getting more important in recent years?
Well, and I can only tell you from my own experience that what I've seen is we get more engaged with technology, and we find that, you know, again, we're in this faster paced environment. Communication is something that takes a little bit of time, and people always want the shortcut. So I'll just send a text. You know, who wants to pick up the phone anymore? I have a couple kids who are, you know, now they're in their 20s, but boy, if they had to make a phone call to somebody, a stranger, it would just be terrifying.
Me too. It's any other option, right? Any other option I can have, but please don't make me call.
So I think that these tools are great, but what I'm finding is that the old-fashioned face-to-face communication is the area that a lot of people still need to be working on, because we're getting so away from it. It's like any other skill, right? The more you do it, the easier it gets, and the less you do it, the less you're good at it. So technology is one of the drivers. I also think in terms of, and it doesn't necessarily have to be generational, because, you know, we have boomers who are so into technology now. So I'm not saying it's only the millennials. It's just technology in general. And the other piece that I find is that we're not really teaching people communication skills as often or as much as I think we could be.
We teach emojis.
We do, yes. Yeah, that's like, think about that, you know, hieroglyphics. I've been to Egypt and I went and see all that. I mean, we're like coming full circle now. Now we have hieroglyphics again. Right?
Oh, that's funny.
With the emojis, they're back.
It's true, actually.
Yeah.
So stepping back as a leader, I just, you know, one of the basics when we look at communications, what are some of the benefits that an organization sees if it's communicating with impact? If leaders are communicating with impact, what do you notice about that organization?
Right. Well, first of all, I think it goes back to one of the most important things, and that is you build deeper relationships. Right? And relationships are so critical in any organization. Relationships with your coworkers, relationships with your customers. So that's a great benefit, just having better relationships. And when I talked about the intention step previously with you, you know, there's many intentions, but for me, everything I do when I'm communicating always has a secondary intention, and that is to build and maintain the relationship.
Trust.
That's is foundation to everything. So that's one great benefit. And the other benefit is, you know, it actually saves time. Because think about it, people don't want to invest. Oh, I'm just going to send out an email. And then you send it out, and all of a sudden now you didn't spend the time thinking about it, and now it's causing a big commotion. Now you got to have a second email, and now you have to have a meeting, now you have to pick up the phone. So invest up front.
Have you been in my office today?
So if you invest up front, right, it saves a lot of time by taking a few extra minutes to think through before you start to communicate. It also reduces errors. I can go on and on about the benefits, you know, but it all goes back to just, there's so many fundamental skills that I think people just assume it's easy. You know.
It's not. How about this one? I get this one all the time, where a leader will say, that's not what I meant. I didn't intend that. Whoa, wait, right? Or they'll ask, you know, I keep saying A and B, A and B, A and B, and they keep hearing X and Y, X and Y, X and Y. What's going on? Surely you've seen that before.
Oh yeah, I've seen it
Why
at home.
Why is that?
Yeah, I think again, communicating is very challenging. We talked a little bit prior to the interview about selective perception, and selective perception is where the meaning of the message is screened by the receiver. And some studies show that up to 70 to 90% of the message is screened by the receiver. So even though I'm saying A or B, I'm not really putting the meaning to the message. It's the person that is receiving the message that's actually interpreting it. So a couple things that you can do to help minimize that. Number one, pick the right method. So if it's a complicated message, sometimes, in addition to having a phone call, it might be good to follow up with an email. So you don't just want to pick one. There's not one tool that works all the time. Complex messages might require multiple tools. It could be a phone call, and it could be a follow-up email. It could be a quick text and call me. So
it's good. So multiple different ways.
Yes.
I'm thinking back to one particular meeting where I was curious about something. I'm the leader. I raised my hand. I asked a question. And I had no motive. It was literally, I just don't understand. I'm asking a question. And the person stood up and said, well, I completely disagree with you, and sort of, well, there's nothing to disagree with.
Right.
I was literally asking a question, seeking to understand what was going on. And was that part of that perception piece, that what she was bringing into the conversation? Is that an example of that?
I don't know enough, but I'm going to make a couple hypothetical guesses. Number one, it's part of selective perception. And number two, there's a mindset that was probably there that got triggered. So I don't know her or him that well, but I think both were happening.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's part of the deliberation, because I would think, I don't know how to, I could write a tweet with the question, or I could send the question. It wouldn't matter if you're going to perceive it that way. It's not going to help much. Let's talk a little bit about listening, because listening is such a key skill. It's something that I always have on my skills for the year.
Right.
How do I get to be a better listener? And when I meet people who are extraordinary listeners, they're just amazing people. I guess they just listen to me go on and on. How do you do this? And you cover in the book a number of active listening skills, kind of active listening tips that people can develop, which I find incredibly, incredibly helpful. Would you share a little bit about that, or maybe a tip or two, or just talk about active listening?
Sure. There's two types of listening. There's active and passive. And we flip back and forth on these. So it's not like we're always in active mode. So first of all, you have to catch yourself. Maybe this has happened to you. You walk into the office, you say, good morning, and somebody yells back, fine, thank you. Right. Passive listening. They assumed you said, how are you? So number one.
Have a good flight.
Yeah.
You too.
Right.
Well, I'm not going anywhere.
Exactly. So we're automatically, perceiving something that's not really there. So trying to be an active listener is very important. And the other piece that's interesting is that there are certain skills, and some of these are so simple, I even hate to tell you them, because you probably know them. But here's what happens. We know them, but we don't always use them. Right? There's a technique called the paraphrase. There's two techniques. One's called the restating, and one's called the paraphrase. Restating is I say right back to you what you said. I'm very frustrated. Oh, you're very frustrated. Well, yes, and then so I restate it back to you. And the other way is to paraphrase it. So what I hear you saying, Skip, is it sounds like. So these are two different tools to kind of listen, but also checking in to get that other person to give more information. Another great tool, and I'm a big believer in having your toolbox full of good questions. And they're open-ended questions, they're closed-ended questions, and so asking good questions can be helpful. So for example, if I said to you, we're going to start having bi-weekly meetings, how often should we be here?
Yeah, is it 2 per month or 2 per week?
Exactly.
Yeah. Bi-monthly, bi-weekly. Yeah. I run into that all the time with people.
So sometimes just, again, that's an example where you don't want to make the assumption, you check for understanding. I love the summary, where you, at the end of a conversation, maybe have a summary to help recap everything. And my philosophy is the longer the communication, the more important the summary. But there are two types of summaries, and most people do the first type, which is, well, let me summarize our conversation today. And the leader decides they're going to do the summary. But what I suggest you try is to get the receiver to do the summary. So you say, hey, Skip, as we're wrapping up today, give me a little idea of what we're going to be happening as we move forward. And then you're going to tell me A, B, and D. And I'll say, excellent. And we talked about C. Oh, that's right, C. So if you get the receiver to do the summary, it's another great way to be a good listener and also to check for understanding.
Yeah, that's really good. I could see that being immediately applicable to a lot of people. Or they just are focused on the one thing, and then you're like, well, you missed the nuances of it, which can happen as well. So these are great talking points about active listening. Do you talk about kind of emotional, physical, mental listening, active listening. What other tips or thoughts do you have around active listening in that regard?
Right. So in addition to communication skills, I also do presentation skills training. And so I talk a lot about you got to engage the receiver. You got to get the people in your audiences to really be engaged because they're so impatient. So every 3 to 5 minutes, you want to bring in a physical or a mental or an emotional engagement. So changing the pace. You can change your voice. Yeah, I got a little secret I want to tell you, Skip. And then people will, that shifts it up. Maybe you have a visual. Maybe you have a story. I really like questions, so rhetorical questions, or if you want the audience to be engaged, maybe asking a quick question. I'm not a big believer of always get people to raise their hands, but sometimes, how many of you have ever noticed, and you get a survey from the group, and then that helps you determine whether or not you want to go deeper or not. I think it's great too, instead of telling people, it's always good to engage people. So I was going to do a little exercise with you, if you're okay with this. When I teach communication skills, I talk about selective perception, and then instead of just saying it's hard to do, I say, well, let's do a little exercise. So I get the whole group to do a spelling bee. So can we do
spelling bee?
Yeah, a little spelling bee.
Okay.
Were you the champ in 8th grade?
Well, I was a champ in 4th grade.
Oh, okay. Well, these are 4th grade words. You'll be great.
Good.
Yeah. So just spell. They're 3-letter words. I want to ask you to spell them, and then we'll talk about selective perception. So spell the word hop.
Hop, H-O-P.
Spell the word pop.
P-O-P.
A little toy you play with. Spell the word top.
T-O-P.
And when you come to a green light, you?
S-T-O-P.
Perfect. You stop. Excellent. So you did a great job. When you come to a green light, you?
S-T-O-P.
Right. Green light.
You go.
So again, you could just tell people about it's tough to be a good listener, or if you do this exercise, you get people's attention. They go, wow, you know what? It is tough to be a good
just
listener.
answering the spelling bee.
Yeah. So,
and the key words you were in a spelling bee. What actually was in my head was not the word mistake, was actually you said 3-letter words. So I recognized, I was thinking, well, stop's a 4, but that's where I was, which was also not so interesting.
Yeah. But the idea is, again, as a presenter today, and I think a lot of leaders do present to groups, keep thinking about how do you bring in what I call these engagers. I mean, watch a show, right? There's a commercial. So how do you get people engaged every 3 to 5 minutes? Don't just get up there and start talking, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes.
They're lost so fast
they are
today.
Yeah.
Our attention spans are not probably what they used to be.
No.
It's very interesting. Well, as you know, I'm all about mistakes.
Yes.
One of the things you should, write a book about mistakes, and maybe it's just because I make so many of them, I don't know. But how about common communication mistakes? You've literally worked with thousands of people. Are there certain mistakes that you just see over and over again, and you're like, yep, check, that's the top few mistakes?
Sure.
Are there any that come to mind?
Well, let's take a couple different methods, for example, like for email. A very common mistake is people forget to change the subject line. I get an email that says, nice seeing you at lunch, and it was like 2 years ago. So it's a common mistake. That email subject line is like the heading of a newspaper. You see it, and you know exactly what it's all about. Very common mistake. When people are making presentations, I find a lot of people don't have an opening or a closing. They just get up and say, good morning, we're going to talk today about X, Y, Z, and the audience isn't paying attention, as opposed to, have you ever noticed? And you open up with a question or a story. So a lot of people are making a mistake where they don't take the time to think about an opening or a closing. When it comes to even face-to-face communications, so many times people are not actually listening. I've had somebody say, I want to have you come in and I want to get some of your ideas, and I'm happy to pay you for your time. I said, oh, great, I'll come over. And then I got to the meeting and the guy talked to me for 30 minutes, never asked me one question. I'm like, I'm okay, I'm getting paid no matter what, but I thought the intention was you want to get some of my ideas. So even just skipping the intention.
Was the intention just for you to say, oh, you're doing great?
I think that's what it was, yeah.
And then respond with, thanks for the lunch.
And another quick one that I find, a lot of people just don't take the time to understand how different we are, right? I mean, a lot of people love the golden rule. I like the golden rule. We all know the golden rule, right? Treat people the way I want to be treated. But I think when you're communicating, a big mistake is people rely too much on the golden rule. I like the platinum rule, which is actually a book by probably someone you may know as well as I do, Dr. Tony Alessandra. And the platinum rule is treat people the way they want to be treated. And so many times people make the mistake of assuming you're just like me. So I would like this, I assume you would like that.
So true. Even communication modes, I ask, if I have somebody new who's working with me, I'd like to ask right up front, what's your preferred communication style? Are you more an email person or in person? Do you like one-on-one and you learn people will share it with you, but nobody usually asks.
Right.
And they just think, well, if the leader does it this way, everyone will respond the same way, and that's a key mistake. I think.
That's another golden rule, right? I like email, you'll like email.
Yeah. Right.
So we talk about preferences and being aware of different preferences, and some of it has to do with the generations, and some has to do with personality style. Yeah, but there's a lot of common mistakes. But I tell you, the thing I like the most is that it's all easy stuff that we can learn from if you take the time to do what I call the WD process. And
WD.
WD, and that stands for what did I do well, and what can I do differently the next time? Yeah. So in the transformation step, we talk about the importance of transforming yourself, where it's a continuous learning process. I mean, you said it, right? Every company says, we got to get better at communications. So one way to get better is constantly evaluate. What are we doing well? What can we change? After every presentation, I tell my clients, take out a piece of paper, put a W and a D, write down, what did I do well today? And what are a couple things I could do differently the next time I make this presentation or the next time I present? And that process right there will make you a better communicator.
I like the different from another perspective too, Patrick, which is the fact that sometimes in company communications, in any organization, you get formulaic. Mm-hmm. The newsletter comes out this day, this happens, and as a result, people kind of gloss over it. Right. It's in the background. And so when you do something a little different, it gets their attention in a little different way, which I appreciate. So to me, that difference is do it differently,
right,
and keep looking at how I can do it differently to get better and better.
Yeah.
So the best leaders are always on this goal to get better and better at some of these key skills, like communications, which we think, oh, well, everybody can communicate, and they can't. It is an elusive goal, isn't it?
It is in a way. Yeah,
that's what keeps you busy.
It does keep me busy because it's really hard to really kind of evaluate and tangibly say this has really gotten the result we wanted. But we do know you can see kind of general movements. Companies that do have good communication tend to have more productive and happier employees. I mean, you can take a look at the research. So there are some big broad goals you can take a look at, but it isn't as easy as A plus B equals C.
No, it really isn't. And I like the fact that we're going back in time with hieroglyphics and images. And it is funny. We go through these long, email, and now we're going back to Instagram, and it's just an image, and
right,
that should communicate it all. So.
Yeah, and I do think that in some ways, Instagram and Twitter, where we force people to be more concise, has been helpful because it really helps people get their message out in a shorter, tamer form. 144 characters. I know they're changing it, but that's a limit, and that forces you to really get specific.
Yeah, it really does. And some of us who are impatient really
right,
like that.
Yes.
In fact, I'd like for it to go to 70. So, anyway, thank you so much for sharing this and giving us some perspective, because it is one of those key skills that leaders are always looking to get better and better at. I know I am, so I appreciate your insights. This book is terrific because it gives you a model and really helps you evaluate how do I get better each time. It's a little too precise, though, of, that was what I missed. So thank you for that.
It's a lot of material in there, but I appreciate the time being with you, Skip. It's good to see you again.
Thanks.